ended from the Germans, Hitler gambled on the landings taking place there.
The Germans bit, and they committed a lot of their forces to defending the Pas-de-Calais and parts away from Normandy. Even though the German High Command had this sort of a gut feeling that something was going to happen at Normandy, they just had to spread their forces thin. And just all the little details of implementing that plan, made the big difference.
Back in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, 16-year-old Therese Ricard was living the life of a typical teenager, hanging out with friends, helping her mother around the house and going to high school. But Ricard was also contributing to the Allies' plan of deception against the Nazis. Every day after school, from 3 to 7 p.m., Ricard would walk down to the U.S. rubber plant in town and paint what the workers only knew as targets.
The only name I knew was targets, which they were apparently from the air.
Those targets turned out to be imitation tanks made out of rubber that appeared real to German airplanes, desperately searching for any sign of where the invasion of Europe would come.
They told us that was in place of real tanks, but that didn't register what it was, We painted the camouflage. That was black.
Workers for Victory, the assembly line that interests Uncle Sam's daughters now.
Ricard earned 49 cents an hour for work that wasn't very meaningful to her. Nobody at the rubber company ever talked about what they were doing. She never heard the words, top secret. It was only recently that Therese found out what she did as a 16-year-old at the U.S. rubber plant contributed in a small way to saving the lives of thousands of Allied troops.
Great, because, if it saved lives, it saved lives. You didn't want the boys to go over there and get killed. A lot of them did.
Woonsocket's contribution to the war didn't end with rubber tanks. The U.S. rubber plant also produced barrage balloons, the famous low-flying dirigibles with long steel cables that helped to keep German aircraft from flying low over London during the Blitz, and later from coming in too close to the Allied ships on D-Day.
In fact, the first time I seen it, I was surprised. I like Wally Lawton, he's from Cumberland. I said, Wally, look at this. I was Woonsocket, Rhode Island. After that, every time we seen one, we used to look for it, made in Woonsocket.
But barrage balloons and fake rubber tanks wouldn't help the Allies get ashore the invasion beaches on D-Day itself. Only the individual Army infantrymen or Navy boat driver could do that. And nowhere was the struggle to survive more intense than on Omaha Beach.
This beach could only talk.
I could see in the background is higher ground,
Then you take a lot of the boats, didn't make it, and that's why half of them guys drowned.
For Richard Fazio, returning to Omaha Beach was something he never thought would happen in his lifetime, or perhaps didn't want to occur.
It's amazing how I made it. I think it was the hand of God that did it, Unbelievable.
Fazio enlisted in the Navy at age 17. This kid from Woonsocket, who had never been on a ship before, was assigned to be a Higgins boat driver, steering one of the boats that would lead the way on the first wave of D-Day. Fazio's landing boat, full of 35 infantry troops, was pointed at the Easy Red sector of Omaha Beach, the place where the well-trained German 352nd Division would provide the toughest resistance. It was H hour, 6:30 a.m. on June 6, 1944, and Rhode Islander Richard Fazio was about to pass through the gates of hell.
We headed into the beach. It was still dark, but then as we headed into the beach, all the ships and everything started firing, and it was one awesome sight. All of a sudden, bullets were hitting on the side of the ship, and the water, and I looked into the well of the boat, and there was 35 soldiers in there, and I don't think there was an atheist in there, because every one of us was making a sign of the cross as we were going in. And I happened to look. I looked to the right, and I seen a boat get hit. And then it's when I realized what we were going into. As I hit the beach, Wally Lawton lowered the ramp, and the soldiers started pouring out. And I seen them dropping. I seen them getting shot. I seen them, their faces blown off. God, it was an awful sight. It's a sight I'll never forget. It's been in my mind since. This is the first time I ever talked about it. I hope it's my last. As they were going off, there was one soldier there that didn't want to leave. I guess he froze. He seen what happened in front of him, and we were instructed not to take anybody back unless they were wounded or dead. As I lifted up my arm, tell him to get off, I was shot over here, and it came out my back.
In England, just prior to the invasion, Fazio spent time getting familiar with Omaha Beach.
2 days before Normandy, all coxswains and captains of the ships, we had a meeting, what they called this pavilion. It was an airplane hangar. That hangar must have been about a half a mile long, and it was wide anyway, and they had the whole replica of the Normandy Beach had there, exactly like it was, and my position was I had to head right straight for a church. I had to watch for the church and head right straight for that church. And that day they assigned us our boats, the boat number and the wave, and I won the lottery. I was first boat, first wave, fifth boat.
Over 60 years later, Fazio drove past that church in the town of Colville he was told to aim for on D-Day.
Richard, you remember this church?
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah,
You remember it?
definitely.
Yeah.
That's the steeple I was supposed to watch coming in on landing. And that was my point of debarkation for the troops. They told me it may not be there when I land, but it was there, and that's all I kept my eye on that until I couldn't see it anymore, and that's when I hit the beach.
Returning to Omaha Beach more than 6 decades after the invasion gives these veterans a chance to see a beach that is now at peace, a beach where in the summertime children and families now play. It also gives the veterans a chance to touch the sand again, to make a connection to history and to their own past. For Richard Fazio, it also provides the chance to look up into the bluffs high above Omaha and see the German gun emplacements that more than likely killed most of his men on June 6, 1944. But this time, those guns are silent.
I can remember the soldiers telling me, go all the way in, I don't want to get wet, I don't want to get wet, you know. They didn't get wet, they got killed.
For Navy radio man Frank Chomka, D-Day's wake-up call came very early.
I can remember it was kind of stormy, and of course there's no lights anywhere showing. We're all in the darkness, and the only thing ahead of me was another tug pulling another big monstrosity.
Aboard a naval tugboat, Chomka and his crew arrived in the early morning hours of June 6th off a quiet Normandy coast. The tug's mission was one of the most important and unique of the invasion: to tow across the 90 miles of English Channel huge concrete blocks that would eventually make up the famed Mulberry harbors, the artificial ports that would supply the American and British invasion beaches until the Allies could capture the French deepwater port of Cherbourg.
I kind of figured it had something to do with, you know, coming events that were going to take place.
The sheer size of the 150 caissons Chamka's boat and the other tugs towed over to Normandy prevented a fast trip. The tug's top towing speed towards France was just 5 miles an hour. Each concrete block was 200 feet long by 60 feet wide and 60 feet high, and weighed as much as 6,000 tons. The remains of the Mulberry harbors can still be seen today, especially off the British landing beaches. A giant section of the artificial harbor also still rests on Omaha Beach.
I never thought that it was going to be a makeshift breakwater or whatever, you know.
When we all landed here, Jesus, all you could see was all boats and everything else. People landing and it's amazing.
Wilson De La Santa knows Omaha Beach better than most. On D-Day, De La Santa was supposed to bring ashore an Army truck loaded with supplies. But like everything else on that day, his plans would change as he approached the Normandy coast.
The tide was coming in so fast. The people were holding hands. I guess a lot of them couldn't swim, but they were holding hands till they get out of the boat. And as you had these half tracks that were going up, and they were popping them off like crazy. Even the people, we were all together there. A lot of them get hit. You could see them going over. The bodies all over the place. The arms, the legs. And the water was pretty red. And you felt real bad when you see one of your own dead. It's pretty hard to take it.
Like most of the troops on the beach, De La Santa would be pinned down on Omaha for most of D-Day. German mortars and gunfire had soldiers searching for any cover they could find. Out in the open, the troops on Omaha were sitting ducks. It was the longest day of De La Santa's life.
I never said much about it because I don't want to keep remembering it. You know, the less I talk about it, the better it is.
Like Richard Fazio, Wilson De La Santa will take a piece of Omaha Beach back to Rhode Island.
I'm amazed to see the way everything is today, you know? Yeah. Because, like I said, when we all landed here, Jesus, all you could see was all boats and everything else.
Waiting aboard a ship in the waters off Omaha Beach on D-Day, U.S. Army heavy machine gunner Philip O'Connell must have had the luck of the Irish with him.
Always had the feeling that somebody's looking after me.
O'Connell was scheduled to land on Omaha Beach, but the call that was going to come at any time never did. And O'Connell and his fellow GIs had a front row seat to one of the greatest moments in the history of the world.
I'd watch the assault boats, or the Higgins boats, disappear into the smoke. If you got close to shore, it'd be a lot of smoke. We were waiting and waiting. We didn't know when we were supposed to join them or go ashore. And I was young then, and I was disappointed, you know. I wanted to be I'm glad I wasn't among the first or second, because most of the people that landed before I did laid there on the beach, they were dead.
It was on D-Day +1 when Philip O'Connell would finally board a transport ship and set foot on Omaha Beach. What he saw there has remained with him for over 6 decades.
I was surprised how many dead people there were, and they're all young. And the sad thing when I think about it now, at the time, you feel sorry for them, but you're glad it's not you. That's how I felt. I feel sorry for these people, but I'm glad it's not me, you know. So, and I think everybody felt that way, you know.
above the cliffs overlooking Omaha Beach, near where Philip O'Connell, Leo Heru, and Wilson de la Santa landed, and where Richard Fazio's men aboard the Higgins boat were killed, is perhaps the most beautiful and yet painful reminder of the cost of freedom on D-Day. For the 5 D-Day veterans, the American Cemetery in Normandy is a place to come to say hello to old friends who never made it home.
Look out there. Isn't that amazing?
Or to just give thanks for what the over 9,300 soldiers who were buried under these white crosses sacrificed for their nation. For Richard Fazio, it's a chance to look down over Omaha Beach and see the exact spot where his landing craft approached the Normandy coast.
So peaceful. The price that was paid for this. I can't understand how this place was bombed so much and it looks like this today. I mean, it looks like God put his hand here and straightened it out. Unbelievable. Now I want to see it this way. I'm going to remember it this way, not the way it was. This is real beautiful, peaceful. I wish my crew were here to see it.
It's right in this area here someplace.
For paratrooper Chris Heisler, coming back to the American Cemetery, where all the white crosses point west towards America, gives him a chance to say hello to that fellow soldier who was aboard his plane on D-Day, but never got the chance to parachute into Normandy.
He was shot in a plane, went down with the plane. Oh my God, there it is. I wasn't too far off, was I? He went down with the plane. I've got some more guys out here, about 7 of them, that were on my plane that were killed within the first couple of days. I used to put a coin on top of each one of those graves of my men when I'd go. If their friends or neighbors came, they'd see that coin and know somebody cared enough to. These guys all gave their life for democracy. That's what the French remember.
One of the white crosses belongs to Maurice Gauthier. Maurice landed here on Utah Beach on D-Day as part of the American 90th Infantry Division. The fighting on Utah wasn't as fierce as Omaha Beach, but still bloody enough. Maurice would survive D-Day, only to be killed in action a little more than a month later in the battle for St. Lo. Gauthier's mother back in Rhode Island got a telegram from the War Department notifying her of her son's death. Gauthier's sister Jackie remembers that day.
They informed us of what had happened, and I think like the rest of the family, it was difficult to accept because we hadn't been with him. It was just a piece of paper that said that he had been killed in action, and it took a while for it to set in. And we really realized that once some of the letters that we had written came back undelivered.
Going back to Normandy to see her brother's grave was a journey that took Jackie O'Clair nearly 50 years.
It was something that I had always wanted to do, but I didn't think I'd ever get to go to his grave in Normandy. And it was quite an emotional experience for me. To be there on his grave after, I think it was nearly 50 years. It was like a a connection, I would say, a reunion of souls maybe. I've often wondered what life would have been like for him.
Their souls may have been committed to God, but their names still echo across this hallowed ground.
Corporal George R. Bailey. Private Andrew Cass.
Staff Sergeant Joseph E.L. Diovito.
Theodore J. Marquis.
Private Horace V. Florio.
Private First Class Elmore R. Harkness.
Private Leonard C. Mooney.
Private First Class Arthur R. Salwa.
Private Thomas Colson Jr.
Private Joseph D. Donato.
Second Lieutenant Niles E. Holman Jr.
First Class Louis M. Proto.
First Class Bartolomeo.
In the American cemetery, these visiting veterans find some solace among those who rest here eternally. It also provides a setting for them to ask why they survived this invasion and this war, while so many here did not.
Why are you here?
The period of reflection doesn't last long, as the silence is broken by the sound of young voices. French school children on a field trip surround these aging men of D-Day to hear their stories and to say thank you.
First kiss, they kiss like this. Then like this.
Hugged and kissed and thank yous and everything else. Unbelievable. And and it's the younger generations besides.
I've got some of my 7 or 8 men here buried that I go visit their graves.
That's why we did it, for them.
It's been more than 60 years since American GIs fought in the French countryside and waged a fierce battle for a foothold in Europe. In France, they remember the sacrifice of the Allies like it was only yesterday. Time may have passed, but the echoes of American soldiers on the move remain.
I'm sure those older French men and women still feel when they think back on it. I'm sure the tears still well up in their eyes when they think of the horrors of German occupation and then the great feeling of liberation that came from D-Day and its aftermath.
D-Day's history is still taught in the schools. It is talked about at the dinner table at home. It is memorialized on stained glass windows in a church in Saint-Mary-Glisse and preserved in museums across Normandy. For the French, D-Day is part of their culture, and these veterans realize now that what they did as young men in this foreign country will never be forgotten. All veterans of this war are reluctant to call themselves heroes, but to the French people, and especially the school children of Normandy, that is indeed what they are. Nowhere is this more evident than in the small town of Montebourg, which was liberated by the Allies after fierce resistance from the Germans.
The men in my unit couldn't have won all their objectives without the help of your grandparents, I guess, maybe great-grandparents. So thank you for your grandmothers and fathers that made us helped us win the war.
These kids see through the graying hair and past the cane that helped stabilize an 89-year-old former paratrooper. They see young American soldiers who traveled a great distance decades ago to free a country from Nazi oppression. These scenes are repeated all over Normandy anytime D-Day veterans return. The walls of a restaurant adjacent to Utah Beach are filled with autographs. Bottles of wine are offered, and there are toasts. The French have not forgotten D-Day, nor will they ever. Long after these veterans have passed on, these children, who will then be adults, will tell their own kids about the day the soldiers visited their school and talked about freedom and sacrifice. They will also tell their kids that these soldiers told them that they aren't the heroes of D-Day, that the real heroes are buried just a few miles away in a cemetery overlooking Omaha Beach. A 7,000-yard stretch of golden brown sand that is so beautiful today, yet still whispers to all who visit, never forget the price that was paid here for freedom.